awaken in a place that doesn't quite feel real, where the air is dry but heavy with age and the silence is too complete. Dust coats everything, the sandals on your feet, the folds of your robe, the carved lip of the stone bowl resting near your hand. You're lying on the tiled floor of a forgotten courtyard, half in shadow, half scorched by the sun. There's no wind, no clouds, just sky blue and merciless. You sit up slowly, and there it is. The first thing you notice is not a temple or a throne, but the heat. And yet, it's not unbearable. Because somewhere nearby, something ancient is working. Cooling the air, maybe. Softly and visibly. This is the heart of ancient Persia around 500 BCE, if the calendar is to be believed. But you're not thinking in years. You're thinking about your tongue sticking to the roof of your mouth, and the whisper of cold that shouldn't exist in a desert. You're in the Achaemenid Empire, stretching from the Indus to the Aegean, where emperors built gardens in the sand and palaces like frozen poetry. It's an empire that on paper should have melted under its own sun. But it didn't. It endured because its people understood something most empires never quite learn: how to bend nature gently. And nature, for a time, bent back. You rise and step through a broken arch where the walls are thick, cool to the touch. They were made that way on purpose, built from mud brick and magic, or at least knowledge passed down in murmurs, not manuals. You know the name Persia. You may think of Persepolis Gold or that one movie with questionable eyeliner. But beneath the crowns and coins lies something far more humble and colder, the first known attempt at refrigeration. Not with Freon or humming boxes, with snow, with stone, with genius. See, ancient Persians were obsessed with balance, hot and cold, sweet and sour. Even good and evil had to be kept in check, or things fell apart. And that mindset extended to their climate. Hot summers meant you needed winter on standby, just in case. Which brings us to the wind. The kind of wind that doesn't arrive naturally. It's coaxed. You spot a tower in the distance, not quite a minaret, not quite a chimney. It's a badger, a wind catcher. Shaped like a hollow reed, it catches the breeze and funnels it downward into buildings, cooling rooms without a single moving part. It's the AC system's spiritual ancestor, and it works even now. You walk beneath one, feel the breath of the mountain wind sliding over your skin, just enough to shiver. Imagine living here, eating dates on a mosaic floor while wind ghosts through the walls, ice buried nearby, waiting to be shaved into sweetness. Mainstream historians agree on the presence of ice storage in ancient Persia. It's not some fringe fantasy. They even had words for it: yakhchāl, literally ice pit. But what they put in those pits wasn't just snow, it was luxury. Power, prestige. One dusty legend claims that servants raced on foot from the Zagros Mountains carrying snow wrapped in wool to reach the capitals before it melted. Another says camels were loaded with it at night, slipping through the dunes like frosty phantoms. Both sound exhausting. Both are probably a little true. Historians still argue whether these practices began under Cyrus the Great Darius or later dynasties. The archaeological record's a bit fuzzy, like a half-melted sorbet. But what's clear is this ice in Persia wasn't just a miracle. It was a message. Look what we can do. Look what you can't. You wander deeper into the complex, your footsteps echoing. Somewhere below you in the cold earth lies a vault of snow, maybe even a treat. Not that it was called ice cream, yet that's centuries away, but the idea has already been born. Cold plus sweet equals bliss, and maybe, just maybe, that's the start of the extinction. Because once humans learned how to trap winter and flavor it, something changed. Deserts stopped being final. Nature stopped saying no. We got a taste for control, and sugar, and things we weren't meant to eat in July. So yes, this place is gone now. The empire fell. The wind catchers wear bird nests like hats. The ice pits are filled with sand. But somewhere in a modern freezer aisle, a tub of rosewater pistachio sorbet carries the ghost of Persia. And, well, you're just getting started. You follow a narrow corridor, ducking slightly, to avoid a ceiling beam that seems to sag with memory. The air thickens as you move, not with heat, but with coolness. Subtle at first, like the breath of a cave, then unmistakable. It kisses your cheeks and draws goosebumps from your arms. You feel it tug at your sandals. The floor beneath your feet is smoother now, deliberately shaped to channel the air's passage. This isn't just a hallway. It's a funnel. You've reached the heart of one of the oldest passive cooling systems in the world, the Badgear wind catcher. An ancient Persian invention that looks a bit like a chimney flipped upside down and inside out, because that's exactly what it is. It catches the faintest breeze above the desert, then channels it down into the depths of the building, sometimes passing over pools of water to amplify the cooling. No electricity, no whirring fans, just silence and stone. You arrive in a round chamber. Above you, the ceiling rises like an inverted flower petal, each curve helping circulate air. Below, a stairway spirals downward into shadow. And suddenly, it hits you. This structure isn't just a building, it's a machine, a living one. You're standing inside a kind of ancient refrigerator sculpted from mud brick and thermal genius. You descend the stairs. With each step, the air grows colder. Not cold. Cold? You're still in the middle of a desert, after all, but enough to make you think of cellars and snowfall. And somewhere faintly something floral tickles your nose, not the scent of decay, something sweeter. At the bottom, a vaulted chamber yawns open. Smooth walls curve around you, designed to reflect heat outward and trap cold within. A drain in the center keeps meltwater from pooling, while narrow vents allow warm air to escape. You see grooves along the walls, possibly to support shelves or baskets, for ice, for perishables, for treats. This is a yakhchāl, literally ice pit in Persian. It's not underground because people were being sneaky. It's underground because the earth is a brilliant insulator. The Persians knew this centuries before modern science caught up. In the winter, snow and ice were gathered from nearby mountains or made artificially by flooding shallow pools at night, letting the cold desert air freeze the water, then scraping it up at dawn. These were packed tightly into the yakhchāl, layered with straw to slow melting. The result, ice that could last well into the blazing summer months. Now here's the fringe part. Some historians suggest that Persian engineers may have used a form of evaporative cooling on purpose, long before the principle was described formally. That is, they knew placing wet mats in air pathways made the air colder. They didn't know why it just worked. That kind of intuition, born from centuries of observation, is equal parts science and sorcery. And speaking of sorcery, this chamber, silent and hollow now, once held something astonishing. Not just ice, but flavored ice. You find a shattered ceramic bowl half buried in the dust. Traces of glaze still shimmer in the dark. In your mind's eye, you picture what it once held, a mixture of grape syrup, honey, and chilled snow scraped together and served to someone important. Someone royal, maybe even someone greedy. The Persians called it falude or sharbat, depending on the mixture. Early versions used thickened grape juice boiled until syrupy, then poured over shaved ice. Rosewater was common too, and sometimes pounded dates, saffron, or crushed pistachios. Not ice cream as we know it, no cream, no churning, but an unmistakable ancestor. And yes, historians still argue whether this qualifies as ice cream. Was it really invented in Persia? Or did China do it first with frozen milk rice slurries flavored with camphor? Or Sicily, where Arabs brought sugar and snow together centuries later? The truth melts in your hand no matter how you try to hold it. But here's what no one disputes. Persia turned cold into art, into architecture, into ritual, and this yakhchāl is proof. You close your eyes. Imagine you're a servant from 2,500 years ago, hurrying down these steps with a tray. Your hands tremble slightly, not from the chill, but from fear. You're delivering a sorbet to a nobleman known for beheading dancers who spill things. And the sun is already high. The snow has melted. The snow, no pressure. There's something beautiful about it, though, this collision of delicacy and dread, of dessert and danger. The ancients didn't separate pleasure from power. The colder the treat, the hotter the politics. But we'll get to that. For now, you're just standing in the cool belly of an idea that shouldn't have worked but did. One final detail, the wind catcher above you still breathes. It hisses faintly, a reminder that even when empires fall, their inventions linger. And somewhere a soft voice might still murmur, "Pass the sorbet." You climb back up into the light, blinking against the glare. The wind feels hotter now, almost offended that you dared to visit the cold underworld. But your mind is still down there inside that yakhchāl, wrapped in straw, surrounded by the scent of rose and snow. It stays with you as you wander through the dusty ruins of what once might have been a bustling estate. And then your foot kicks something, a clay jar, half sunk in the sand, its mouth sealed with a chunk of stone, as though trying to guard its secrets. You crouch, brush it off, and pop the lid. Inside is, well, mostly dust now. But once it may have held something precious. Maybe a slushy, gritty dessert that tasted like summer in slow motion. Something called sharbat, a word still used today in parts of the Middle East and South Asia, meaning syrup drink or sweet mixture. Here's the curious bit. Ancient Persians didn't treat ice as food. They treated it as a foundation. What mattered wasn't just the temperature, it was the taste, the texture, the luxury. Because this wasn't a society that drank cold water to cool off. No, they used chilled treats to elevate life. Ice was art. You walk through a partially crumbled courtyard where faded mosaics line the walls in swirls of blue and ochre. You imagine servants bustling in the corners, carrying trays of glass bowls, and on each bowl a cold heap of crushed snow mixed with grape a thick tart syrup made from freshly pressed grape seeds and all. Historians confirm this wasn't a rarity. The grape must was called doshab, and it was so highly prized it was sometimes kept locked in ceramic amphorae sealed with tar. Add a spoonful of rosewater, a whisper of saffron, and a drizzle of honey. And you've got a frozen poem. Still, it wasn't just for nobles. Even the common people had versions of this simpler, rougher made with what they had. Snow from the mountains mixed with mulberry juice or tamarind pulp. You think of a young child in a dusty village, slurping sticky snow from a clay cup, giggling as it drips down their wrist. The joy of it transcends time. The messiness, too. And this is where it gets weirder. Some archaeologists believe that early sharbats weren't always consumed with spoons. They might have been sipped through hollow reeds or poured slowly into the mouth, more like a snow drink than a dessert. Fringe, yes. But you picture a banquet hall with high-backed chairs and goblets full of slush. No straws, no plastic, just carved reeds and cold syrup. One clay inscription from a later Persian dynasty even mentions the storage of liquids for cooling in layered pits, though scholars still debate whether this referred to sorbet medicinal concoctions or something far stranger. One theory, entirely unconfirmed but fun to imagine, suggests these mixtures were used in rituals to trap the winter during solstice ceremonies, a cold offering to heat-stricken gods. Historians still argue whether Persian cold treats influenced Greek or Roman cuisine directly, or if they evolved separately. But certain records hint that Greek physicians admired Persian knowledge of diet and climate balance. One scroll even notes how the Persians believed cold food could balance a person's inner fire. You imagine a philosopher taking notes, then asking if he can take a second bowl. The philosophical side of ice cream, who knew? You pause by a stone bench and sit. The air buzzes with silence, and somewhere a lizard darts between shadows. You pull from your bag a date, soft, sticky, sun-warmed, and take a bite. It tastes like sugar mixed with memory. Now imagine that frozen, crushed into snow, sprinkled with saffron and pine resin. This was a world that believed in elevating the ordinary. And it wasn't just about what was in the bowl. It was how it was served. Some noble houses used bowls carved from translucent alabaster. Others used chilled bronze dishes or ceramics glazed with deep blue and gold. You don't just eat a treat like this. You experience it like music or vengeance. You notice a crumbled wall covered in faded frescoes, scenes of banquets of musicians, of women laughing under pomegranate trees. There, in one corner, a man is holding a shallow dish with a tiny spoon. The image is too worn to make out the details. But you want it to be sorbet. Your brain insists it is. It just feels right. The scene is lighthearted, but the more you stare, the more you realize, even here, the cold was never just about comfort. It was about control, about being able to say in the middle of July, I can make winter appear in a bowl. And when you can summon snow at will, what else might you summon? You leave the courtyard passing beneath an arch, so ancient, its keystone looks like it might sigh and collapse if you glance at it wrong. Ahead, through the haze of sand and time, is a garden, or what's left of one. Low rectangular stone channels once carried water between beds of herbs, now dry and cracked. A fig tree leans tiredly in one corner, stubbornly green in a sea of beige, and beside it sits the faint outline of a raised platform, once shaded by a canopy now exposed to the stare of the sun. You imagine it, as it once was, a place of music, of perfumed robes, of idle gossip. And in the center of it all, a servant glides forward with a clay bowl. Inside, something astonishing. Grape must-chilled in snow, flavored with rose petals, topped with slivers of pistachio. The first sorbet. The word didn't exist yet, of course. Not in this form. But the experience did. Cold, fragrant, and fleeting. Like a kiss from the mountains or a love letter written in condensation. A dessert designed not to fill your belly, but to remind you that luxury is temporary. That pleasure, real pleasure, melts. You lift an imaginary spoon to your lips. Your teeth ache with imagined cold. Persians didn't just invent the architecture of refrigeration. They created a ritual around it, and the earliest sorbets weren't frozen solid. They were soft, slushy, drinkable. Think less Haagen-Dazs, more delicate ice and syrup poetry. These weren't snacks. They were statements, historical fact. The Achaemenids, and later the Sassanids, placed enormous cultural weight on food rituals. Banquets were stages for power plays. Who was served first? Who got the better wine? Who received their bowl chilled with fresh snow at the leftovers from 3 days ago? Quirky tidbit. Some feasts were so elaborate, servants used scented ice, snow perfumed with frankincense, saffron, or even oud, not to eat, just to cool the air and make it smell fancy. air conditioning that smells like a perfume ad, because why not? You wander toward a broken column and trace your fingers along the spiral carvings. You picture a nobleman reclining beside you, trailing one hand in a shallow stone pool, as a servant stirs his sorbet. He's not smiling. Not really. He's waiting for someone else's dessert to melt a little more, just enough to signal disrespect. He'll notice. He always does. Because cold desserts in this world aren't just each about refreshment. They're about status. Snow from the farthest mountains meant you had connections, access, servants, the grape must that had to be pressed within hours of harvest or it turned bitter. Rosewater had to be distilled, slowly, carefully, with petals picked before sunrise. And the bowls. You weren't really in the game unless yours came rimmed with gold or inlaid with turquoise. And so even desserts got political. Here's where it gets complicated. You see, many scholars still debate whether these early sorbets were served to everyone at royal feasts or just a select few. Some argue that everyone present got a chilled treat, just with varying ingredients depending on your rank. Others say only those of high status were served snow at all, while the rest drank tepid wine and pretended not to notice. The truth, probably both. You've seen how humans work. You sit now on a cool stone ledge, the breeze rustling the dead leaves around your feet. You imagine your hands stained with grape syrup, sticky from honey. Your fingers grip a slender spoon carved from bone or ivory, passed down for generations. You've never owned a yakhchāl, but you've been near one. That's enough. You remember an old tale whispered among servants, never written down, that says, if you eat sorbet made from snow gathered on the first day of winter, you'll never be touched by heat again. A myth, sure, but the kind that spreads, that clings like frost to legend. One merchant, so the story goes, faked such sorbet using salted water and crushed alabaster. It worked until a prince tasted it and spat it out dramatically, declaring, "This is not the breath of the mountain. This is the cough of the quarry." The merchant disappeared, possibly into a pit. Food poisoning? Nope. Just bad vibes. Because if you're going to offer someone winter in a bowl, you'd better not get it wrong. You lean back and exhale. It's amazing, really, how this little moment of coolness, of flavor, of contrast, echoes through centuries. It's just dessert, right? And yet, it's so much more. A symbol, a flex. A bit of magic passed from empire to empire, melting slightly in each hand. And this is only the beginning of its journey. You wake from a midday nap, startled by the soft jangle of distant camel bells. It takes a moment to remember where you are, not just in a garden of forgotten flavors, but on the edge of something vast. The wind shifts, carrying the dry rustle of silk and hooves. And then you see it, a caravan trailing dust like a bridal veil across the golden horizon. You shade your eyes. Dozens of camels, their heads bobbing in time, move like a river of quiet endurance. Merchants in layered robes walk alongside them, muttering to one another, their voices rising in the heat. This is not just a trade route, it's a vein through which the empire's luxuries flow. And make no mistake, what they carry isn't just spice, silk, or pearls. It's recipes, whispers, a new way to sweeten snow. These are the silk roads. But sugar rides them too. Crystallized brown, rare, expensive as gold, and more addictive. You feel your tongue tingle just imagining a spoonful of snow drizzled with sugar-cane syrup, dark, thick, slow as honey. Once it arrives, everything changes. You follow the caravan to a resting outpost, half fortress, half bazaar. Clay walls, shaded alleys, merchants, swatting flies off trays of dried apricots. One man sells small jars of saffron sealed in wax. Another offers rose petals layered with sea salt. These ingredients will journey across mountains, deserts, oceans, and somewhere someone will stir them into crushed snow and call it dessert. Now for a quirky twist, some early sorbet recipes didn't come from royal kitchens. They came from apothecaries. That's right. Persian physicians sometimes recommended icy concoctions as medicine. Heatstroke takes snow with rosewater and myrtle oil. Bad digestion. Try snow mixed with sour cherry syrup and a pinch of ground iris root. One scroll even suggests freezing melon juice and serving it between meals to reset the tongue. Historians still argue whether these treatments were real or just indulgent prescriptions disguised as medical advice. But you know how it is. If a doctor tells you to eat sorbet, who are you to argue? You pause by a stall selling a primitive sugar loaf shaped like a small tower designed to be chipped away with a blade. Sugar wasn't refined yet. It was rough, gritty, mineral-like. You imagine trying to mix it into snow, grinding it down with a stone mortar, sighing as it refuses to dissolve. But you keep stirring. Cold, sweet, persistent. Just like the desert wind. And here comes another traveler, his robe dusted white with road salt, his pack full of dried lemons and candied quince. He speaks of a town across the river where they've begun mixing frozen yogurt into their icy drinks. Goat's milk, strained and chilled, churned slowly into something richer, thicker. Not quite ice cream, but it's coming, because flavors are migratory. They travel, mutate, evolve. The rosewater that started in Persia ends up in India, then France. Saffron seeds smuggled in saddlebags. A handful of tamarind packed in a silk pouch becomes the base of a summer drink halfway across the world. You lean against a sun-warmed wall and sip from a borrowed bowl. It tastes like everything at once, snow syrup secrets. You're drinking history, melted and spiced. And it's here that sorbet begins to slip through Persia's fingers, slowly, gently, like a rumor on the wind. The merchants don't know it yet, but the very thing that gave their kingdom its cooling crown will also make it replaceable. Because once a dessert travels, it no longer belongs to just one people. So yes, the Silk Roads brought sugar and saffron, but they also brought competition. And the next stop, well, let's just say the Romans are getting hungry. You blink and the sky changes. The sun lowers toward the jagged edge of the desert hills, and the wind shifts from dry to cool in that way that makes you wonder just for a moment if there's snow behind it. But no, not snow, just ingenuity. You approach a new structure, now half dome, half scoop, like someone tried to carve a hill out of clay with a spoon. This is not a palace nor a temple. It is something more mysterious to modern eyes, a yakhchāl, in its full, unruined form. You've seen one before, buried, crumbling, whispering from below. But this is different. It's still standing, still waiting. The walls are thick, over 2 meters in places. They slope outward at the base and narrow at the top, like a beehive drawn by someone who's never seen a bee. The outer shell is made of a special mixture, sarouj, clay, lime sand, goat hair ash, and sometimes crushed pottery. Why? Because it resists heat and time. It's waterproof, flameproof, possibly even gossip-proof. You run your fingers along the surface, smooth as thought, cool despite the dying sun. Inside there's no door, just a narrow crawl entrance meant to keep warm air out. You squeeze through. And there it is again, the breath of winter in the middle of a desert evening. Unlike cellars or wine vaults, this place is designed with geometry in mind. The dome shape helps circulate cold air downward. The floor slopes subtly to drain meltwater. Vents high in the ceiling allow warm air to escape. It's a thermal trap. Nature gently tricked. This is no myth, this is science. Mainstream historians widely agree that Persian engineers mastered passive refrigeration more than 2,000 years ago, without electricity, without ice machines, without blinking LED thermostats, just air shape and patience. Here's a fringe delight. Some yakhchāls sites show evidence of production, not just storage. At night, shallow pools would be filled with water just outside the structure. As desert temperatures plummeted, the surface would freeze. Come morning, workers collected the fragile sheets and carried them inside. A nightly ritual, a slow, cold harvest. You think of them bundled in wool cloaks, scraping frost with copper scoops, while the stars blink above like cold, judging eyes, whispering to each other about frostbite and frost dates, maybe singing. You sit on the stone lip of the pit, now dry. Imagine it filled with blocks of ice layered with straw, like a massive winter baklava. At the top, a ceramic shelf where someone once placed a bowl of syrup, waiting for it to chill. In this space, time slows down. The world feels muffled. You could be anywhere 5 centuries ago or 5 minutes ago. And all around you, the architecture hums with silent, stubborn purpose. Historians still argue over who built the first yakhchāl. Some say it was during the Achaemenid period. Others believe it came later, refined by the Parthians or Sassanids. No one's entirely sure. The structures themselves don't brag. They simply stand and breathe. You crawl out into the twilight. The dome casts a long, cool shadow like a fossilized ghost. A bird lands on its peak, confused. Nearby, you spot a smaller structure, a bagger, its slatted tower catching what little breeze remains. Together, the wind catcher and the ice dome form a system. One cools the air. The other preserves the chill. No cords, no compressors. Just knowledge handed from hand to hand. And you realize this wasn't just about how to keep things cold. It was about where. Yakhchāls were often placed in specific areas, shaded by hills near underground streams or positioned to take advantage of seasonal winds. Their builders understood topography, humidity, thermal inertia without ever drawing a graph. You walk along a narrow trench nearby, a knat, an underground water channel carved with impossible precision, sometimes stretching for miles. It brings water from distant mountains hidden beneath the earth. No pumps, no noise, just a silent ribbon of life. You crouch beside it, listening. The trickle is faint, but it's there. And now a moment of gentle absurdity. Some modern engineers have attempted to recreate yakhchāls using ancient methods. The result, mixed reviews. One team accidentally sealed themselves inside their prototype for 3 hours. Another discovered that goats love licking freshly made sarouj plaster. Who knew? But here's the real question. Why don't we still use them? Maybe because they're slow, or bulky, or stubborn. But maybe also because we've forgotten how to wait, how to gather snow by moonlight, how to let architecture breathe. And so the yakhchāl sits in the sand watching the sun rise and fall, watching kingdoms melt, watching ice cream become a billion-dollar industry. But deep inside, it remembers when it all began with a single bowl of snow, flavored with patience. Evening settles over the desert, like a silk scarf, soft, slow, and faintly perfumed. You walk now through the skeletal remnants of a once grand estate, arches open to the stars' walls, casting long shadows that vanish into silence. Somewhere nearby, you hear the low murmur of a water channel, though you can't see it. But what you do see beneath a collapsed colonnade is a patch of smooth marble, still gleaming in the dim light. This was once a dining court, a place where things were served quietly, ceremonially, and sometimes politically. You step across the cracked tiles. The ghosts of lavish banquets whisper beneath your sandals. And in your mind's eye, you see it bowls of chilled snow sweetened with pomegranate syrup, served not with joy, but with strategy. Because you're in the part of the story where cold treats become power tools, eh? You sit cross-legged on the floor where nobles once reclined, fanned by servants, surrounded by gossip, sharper than any blade. Here, something as innocent as dessert could determine the rise or fall of a noble house. Why? Because in a world where access was everything, being served snow in the summer wasn't just luxurious, it was a signal. Mainstream historical accounts confirm that food, especially cold food, played a key role in court diplomacy. Royal chefs were briefed like generals. Presentation mattered as much as flavor. And cold desserts, impossible without infrastructure and resources, became edible symbols of status, favor, and intent. Imagine an ambassador from a minor satrapy is offered a warm bowl of dates while the delegate beside him receives chilled sharbat in a jeweled cup. It seems small, petty, but nothing in court was accidental. Historians still argue whether these subtleties were deliberate policy or just cultural instinct, but the records are suggestive. One Sassanid scroll lists not just menu items for a royal feast, but the temperature. Each dish was expected to be served at, including a line reading snowed pomegranate syrup, third bowl, to be delivered only to the favored. Ouch. You think about the logistics. Someone had to retrieve that snow. Someone had to cool the bowls, mix the syrup, ensure the right consistency, not too slushy, not too solid. That's not dessert. That's espionage, with a garnish. And it wasn't always subtle. In one recorded case, a prince was reportedly served a lukewarm sorbet during a succession feast. He smiled, then a week later disappeared into military service. A coincidence, maybe. Or maybe his bowl told him everything he needed to know. You spot a fragment of painted tile near your foot, a curling vine, a stylized pomegranate. You imagine a servant trembling as he delivers a tray. He knows what's in the bowl and, more importantly, what isn't. The wrong treat, the wrong temperature, and a future might unravel before the first spoonful. Here's a quirky tidbit. Certain royal households had ice tasters, officials whose sole job was to taste the cold desserts before they were served, not to detect poison. No, their concern was quality, texture, chill. Some even kept tasting notes. One particularly finicky noble reportedly banished a chef for serving snow with the stiffness of apathy. That's dramatic, but also kind of iconic. And let's not forget the spoons. Yes, the spoons. Cold treats in ancient Persia weren't eaten with fingers. That was for flatbread and a roast goat. No sorbets required. Tiny ornate spoons, carved from bone-horn bronze, even crystal, a sort of frozen elegance. It's believed that some spoons were cooled before use, stored beside the snow to prevent melting. Imagine a banquet where even the cutlery glowed with chill. So much effort for a moment of sweetness, or a message hidden in temperature. You recline against a low wall, staring at the stars emerging one by one. You wonder how many alliances were cemented over a bowl of sharbat. How many betrayals began with a lukewarm dessert. It sounds absurd. But then again, so does putting ice in the desert. And yet here we are. One last note before you drift the word sherbet, which eventually becomes sorbet, sorbetto, and more likely derives from the Arabic sharba, meaning a drink. It wandered from Persia to the Mediterranean, changing flavor and form, but always keeping one thing constant: a chill that means something. So the next time someone hands you a scoop of icy sweetness, pause. Taste it slowly. Ask yourself what it's trying to say. And remember, once upon a time it might have whispered, "You're in, or you're out." The sky has gone full indigo now, and you're walking under stars so clear it's like the universe forgot to hang curtains. There's no sound but your own breath and the soft crunch of your sandals on grit. And yet, as you crest a low hill, you find a scene pulled straight from a dream. Below, lit by flickering torchlight and surrounded by lavish tents, a royal banquet. Not a memory. A reenactment, maybe. A dream nested inside another dream. But for now, it feels real. You move closer, crouching behind a rock like a very polite spy. Musicians pluck stringed instruments, dancers twirl with slow elegance. But all eyes are drawn to the center table, where a wide bronze tray gleams in the firelight. Upon it, snow. Not just snow, sculpted snow. Pressed into peaks dyed with juices of pomegranate and plum and decorated with slivers of almond and mint. You watch a servant approach the emperor with a gilded bowl and lowered eyes. The emperor dips his spoon, lifts it slowly, and smiles. A rare thing. But that smile, it just changed someone's life. You've entered the age when rulers, true rulers, not regional governors or noble dilettantes, demand winter even when the world is on fire, literally and politically. Emperors of Persia, and later the caliphates, understood that presentation was permanence. If you could produce ice in the dead heat of summer, you controlled not just your people, but time itself. Mainstream historians agree that rulers across ancient Asia Minor, the Levant, and North Africa all began competing for colder, fancier, rarer treats as early as the 5th century BCE. It wasn't just about taste, it was spectacle. A miracle they could summon and serve in a spoon. You've probably heard the story of Alexander the Great, demanding ice during his campaigns, sending runners to the mountains only to get a single bowl of snow laced with honey. Or the tale of Nero, who ordered ice fetched from the Apennines to mix with fruit pulp and wine. Were these stories exaggerated? Probably. Did they still influence empires to come? Absolutely. Historians still argue whether these rulers directly copied Persian methods or just stumbled on the same idea by coincidence. But what's certain is this: the idea of controlling cold became a signature of elite power. Wow. And yet not all snow was equal. There were grades. Some was cut from higher altitudes. Some stored longer strain for purity or mixed only with specific flavors. The snow from Shiraz was prized for its density. Snow from the Elburz Mountains' lighter area. Imagine sending scouts not for enemies, but for the best snow batch. Quirky details: certain emperors reportedly named their favorite snow suppliers, like wine vintners. A good year meant finer flakes, less melt, and a better mouthfeel. That's right, mouthfeel. A term you didn't think belonged in ancient ice, and yet here we are. You creep a little closer, peeking into another tent. Inside, two diplomats speak quietly over bowls of sorbet, so vibrant they seem to glow. Pomegranate, red, saffron, yellow, and a shocking violet that can only be blackberry. They're not talking about flavor. They're talking about alliances. Because when emperors ate winter, their enemies sweated. Sorbet wasn't just served. It was weaponized. Rumors spread that certain flavors were reserved only for the inner circle, that your access to ice could be revoked. Imagine the horror: no more cold treats, just tepid figs and yesterday's bread. You lean back and imagine being a servant in that court. Your job: keep the emperor's snow at the perfect consistency. Too frozen and it breaks the spoon. Too soft and it melts before his second bite. You sweat, you panic, you say a prayer to Anahita, goddess of water. And if you succeed, he nods. And the world doesn't end. And that nod, that's your raise, or your survival. One scroll even records a Sassanid official awarded a gold ring after inventing a new slush method involving strained honey and crushed coriander seeds. He called it Narin-i-Bard, the delicate of cold. Try not to picture it. Too late. Some days it's easy to forget that rulers lived in fear of rebellion, famine, invasion. But here, at the cold heart of their court, they found a ritual, a stillness, a bowl of something sweet, fleeting, and entirely under their control. And for a few bites at least, nothing melted. Morning creeps in with pale blue light, and the fire from last night's banquet has long since died. The desert is quiet again, and you find yourself walking along a narrow path carved by centuries of footsteps and animal hooves. It curves between crumbled walls and skeletal fig trees, winding toward what looks like an outpost, a merchant stop, maybe even a kitchen, but not a Persian one. No, this one feels different. The air smells of cardamom and tamarind. You hear the faint clatter of metal on stone and the rustle of palm leaf baskets. The script etched into the wall is not Old Persian. It's Devanagari's. You've wandered into India centuries after Persia's snowy sorbet began melting into other cultures. And here's where things get deliciously messy. The idea of cold desserts has drifted like a spice cloud across empires. It's been stirred, churned, and sweetened in ways the original inventors could never have imagined. And now you're in the early kitchens of Mughal India, watching history be rewritten with milk mango and a lot more sugar. You peer inside a shaded chamber, where cooks in loose robes squat beside wide, shallow bowls set into sand pits. They stir slowly, patiently, over ice-lined trays. One adds a splash of rosewater. Another drops in crushed pistachios. A third tastes from a curved spoon and nods. You've arrived at the birthplace of Yaput Kulfi. It's not sorbet anymore. It's richer, creamier. There's milk in the mix now, slowly boiled down into a thick custard before freezing. Some recipes use cardamom and saffron. Others feature almond paste and jaggery. And though it doesn't spin in a machine, it does, freeze-sealed in conical molds and buried in packed ice, often with salt, to drop the temperature faster. This is the start of the ice cream's next chapter. Mainstream historians agree that by the 16th century, the Mughals were not only enjoying kulfi, they were building on Persian traditions with local flavors and materials. The concept of cold sweetness had become mobile, adaptable, something that could cross mountains and still taste like home. Quirky tidbit. Some Mughal emperors reportedly kept entire snow gardens, enclosed courtyards where snow or ice was stored in ornate basins surrounded by flowers. Not for refrigeration, just for vibe. Snow became scenery, ice became aesthetic, and the spread didn't stop at India. You follow another caravan route westward, past the scent of citrus orchards and into the Mediterranean world. They're nestled between crumbling amphorae and olive presses. You find Greek scribes arguing about ice mixing ratios. One insists that honey is superior to grape must. Another swears by fermented cherry water and wild thyme. The most dramatic among them waves a scroll and cries, "You boil the snow." That's culinary treason. No one really knows how the sorbet story unfolded here. Historians still argue whether the Greeks and Romans independently developed cold desserts, or borrowed from Persian and Arab traders. The evidence is half-legible, fragmentary, and smells faintly of date syrup. But what we do know, by the time of the Roman Empire, emperors like Nero were using relay runners to fetch snow from the Apennines. The snow was stored in deep pits, packed in straw and flavored with honey or mulled wine. The Romans, as always, took what they liked and renamed it. And so snow became nivate potiones, snow drinks, more medicine than dessert at first. But isn't that always how we justify indulgence? You stand now on a hill overlooking a Roman villa, where servants pour chilled drinks through funnels of bronze, whispering the names of herbs and fruits. One aristocrat boasts that his snow came from a higher peak than his neighbors. Another adds a single drop of garum fermented fish sauce, just to shock the guests. Everyone claps politely and pretends it's delicious. Back east, meanwhile, Persian chefs are re-importing some of these flavors. Rosewater meets cinnamon, saffron meets fig. The flavors whirl like dancers changing partners at a banquet that never ends. And here's where things start to melt together literally. Cultures borrow, adjust taste, and remix. The snow that began in Persian yakhchāls now travels in Roman amphorae, Indian copper trays, and eventually into something colder, creamier, more permanent. You don't know it yet, but you're standing at the edge of ice cream's true birth. All the elements are here: milk, ice, sugar, status. The only thing missing is churn, but we'll get to that. For now, you pause beneath a pomegranate tree and bite into a ripe fruit. Its juice runs down your wrist, tart and sweet. You close your eyes and imagine it chilled, spooned over ice spiced with mint. You've tasted it before, in Persia, in India, in Rome, in dreams. Cold crosses borders, but it also lingers, waiting for the next flavor. You don't remember falling asleep under the pomegranate tree, but you wake to birdsong and the slow stretch of dawn across your face. The breeze is cool again, but not from the desert. It carries the smell of seawater now. Salt, citrus, and maybe a hint of almond. You've drifted again this time, to a rocky coastline where sunlight glitters off tiled rooftops and narrow alleys hum with voices. You're in Sicily, sometime in the early Middle Ages, a place where Persians have long since left their mark, and now Arab rulers hold the island in their careful, calculating hands. And it's here, beneath Sicilian sun and Arab intellect, that a quiet revolution begins the birth of sorbet, as we come to know it. You wander into a market square lined with marble fountains and lemon trees. The stalls brim with nuts, dried figs, and jars of something golden and sticky. You ask a sleepy vendor what it is. He shrugs and says, "Zaben," a word that may mean syrup or frozen treat or both. Language is slippery here, like snow in July. Under the Arabs, Sicily becomes a hub for sugar production. The old Persian grape, must, and honey are giving way to something sharper, more crystalline, refined sugar, imported from Egypt, pressed from cane, and slowly trickling into desserts like sunlight through latticework. Mainstream historians agree by the 9th century the Arabs had brought both sugar cane and ice practices to the Mediterranean. And Sicily, with its high mountains and sea breezes, became a natural laboratory. Here snow was gathered from Mount Etna and stored in deep stone pits shaded by citrus groves. The perfect ingredient for something new. And here's the twist. Sorbetto in Sicily didn't stay Persian. It evolved. Where Persian sharbat was floral and thin, sorbetto in Sicily became bold and fruit-driven. Lemon was king, almond a close second. Eventually you'd find bergamot, coffee, even jasmine. These weren't medicinal. They were indulgent. Quirky tidbit. Some snow vendors in medieval Palermo reportedly employed street criers who sang about the flavor of the day. Snow with orange blossom, one would shout. Mint and honey ice, 3 coppers another would trill, waving a brass spoon in rhythm. Ice became theater. You slip into a shadowed courtyard where a woman churns a mixture in a basin set inside a larger bowl packed with snow and salt. She turns the basin, slowly muttering under her breath. It's the oldest trick in the new book. Salt lowers the melting point of ice, pulling more cold from the snow, freezing the liquid faster. You lean in and sniff its almond milk, sugar, rosewater. That basin, that's your first ice cream machine. Historians still argue whether it was invented here or in China or somewhere else entirely. Some credit the Chinese with early churned milk ice methods around 200 BCE. Others say the Arabs brought this knowledge west. Still others point to India's kulfi or Rome's snow drinks. No one agrees. And maybe that's the point. Because cold desserts don't belong to one place. They belong to desire, to that deep human craving for contrast, sweetness and heat, cold and chaos. You walk now along a harbor wall, where Sicilian boys eat shaved ice from paper cones, their fingers stained purple with mulberry syrup. You pass a nobleman sipping lemon ice from a chilled glass, nodding smugly at nothing in particular. And you pass an old man sitting alone, spooning sorbet into his mouth with the reverence of a priest, each bite a prayer. Here's something wild. As sorbet spread across Sicily and into mainland Italy, it became so popular that certain cities appointed snow inspectors officials who checked that vendors used clean snow stored properly, not scavenged from muddy hillsides or worse cemetery mounds. Yes, that happened. Delicious. These inspectors carried brass rods and issued fines, but they also protected something fragile, the trust between seller and customer, between snow and tongue. You sit beside a marble fountain, the water whispering beside you. A boy hands you a cone of lemon granita, grainy cold, a little tart. You bite into it and feel the centuries melt across your palate. Persia, India, Rome, and now Sicily, all in one frozen flake. A breeze blows from the harbor. Somewhere a donkey brays. You close your eyes and picture a bowl of sorbet carried through a hot courtyard, its surface trembling like a secret. You picture a servant holding their breath, hoping it makes it to the table, still perfect. Because even now, centuries after the first bowl of snow, cold desserts are still a kind of performance, still a kind of promise. And with each migration, each new flavor, they come closer to something else entirely. Something smoother, something richer, something ready to be called gelato. You're moving again westward, still trailing the scent of lemon rind and burnt sugar through the air as it changes from salt, crisped coastal breezes to the heavier, roasted tones of city stone and firewood. You've arrived in Florence. Though it could be Naples or Bologna or any Renaissance city where ambition simmers hotter than the sun. And here sorbet isn't just food, it's reputation. You duck through a narrow alleyway where copper pans hang from windows and the cobblestones are slick with summer sweat. The year is sometime in the 16th century, maybe 1580. No one's wearing a watch. And in one small kitchen, tucked behind the marble columns of a merchant's villa, something remarkable is happening. Sorbet is transforming slowly, silently into ice cream. Not in name, not yet, but in a texture. A cook, a culinary artist, is testing something new. He's added milk to the mixture. Not cream, not yet. Just a little goat's milk strained and warmed. He churns it slowly in a copper bowl over salted ice, muttering the names of herbs under his breath like incantations. And in that moment, dairy and snow meet, and the dessert changes. This is where things start to blur. Historians still argue, was it Bernardo Buontalenti, the Florentine polymath who first invented modern gelato? Or did he merely perfect what others had started? And some say it was the Medici court chef. Others swear it was the Arab ice merchants. Some point all the way back to China again. The truth, like most good desserts, is layered. But this much is agreed: by the late 16th century, the Italians were churning milk into cold delight, and it wasn't long before the upper classes were obsessed. You walk past a piazza where a noblewoman dips a spoon into a pale lavender scoop milk, flavored with violet and honey. Her hand trembles slightly with delight. Her companion tastes his and mutters, "Too much time." He's wrong, of course. Here's the twist: unlike the stiff Persian sharbat or the flaky Sicilian granita, gelato begins as something softer, denser, less airy. It melts slower, clings longer to the tongue, and most importantly, it's served warmer than modern ice cream, just a few degrees. But that warmth, it carries flavor better. You stop in a side street bakery where a boy hands you a shallow dish. Inside, chestnut gelato with a drizzle of fig syrup. It's almost warm, not in temperature, but in feeling. It doesn't shock your mouth like American ice cream. It welcomes you in gently. Mainstream sources confirm that gelato contains less fat and air than modern ice cream. That makes it feel silkier, taste deeper, and sit heavier in the best way. You sit on a cool step and watch as servants hustle silver basins into a palazzo kitchen. They don't smile. This dessert is serious business. Because now frozen treats are no longer the fringe luxury of Persian emperors, their currency in court politics. Quirky tidbit: some Italian nobles hired personal gelato makers, like a butler but colder. Their job to create new flavors weekly, preferably symbolic. One recipe created for a wedding between rival families featured 2 sorbets served side by side, 1 white almond, 1 blood orange, sweet, bitter, peace and memory in 1 bowl. You'd think that would be enough, but of course it isn't, because the French are watching. At a banquet hosted by Caterina de' Medici, Florentine princess turned Queen of France, the nobility is served a new delicacy: frozen cream flavored with orange blossom. A dish never seen in France before. It stuns them, it delights them, it offends a few powdered noses, and it begins a fevers. France wants cold, France wants flavor, France wants it better. You pass through a market where vendors now sell not just ice, but permission. The right to chill your creams, your custards, your future. Underground snow vaults are built, recipes guarded. The dessert, once a whisper, is now a full-throated cultural competition. By the end of the 17th century, you'd find frozen custard, sometimes sweetened with egg yolk, sometimes stiffened with starch, served in Versailles beside golden forks. It was no longer snow plus syrup. It was alchemy. And slowly, one by one, the names change. Sharbat becomes sorbet. Sorbet becomes gelato. Gelato becomes glace. Glace becomes ice cream. You take another spoonful of your chestnut gelato. It tastes like history and invention, like failure that froze and came back beautiful. You lean back and whisper to the sky it started with snow. And look what it became. You stretch your legs and stand brushing off crumbs of almond from your robe, which, let's be honest, has somehow evolved into a pair of slightly too modern pants. It's hard to keep the centuries straight when your dessert keeps changing names. But the next step in this story smells unmistakably like Freon and neon signs. You've reached the era of refrigeration. You stroll into a town that hums, literally. Metal rattles. Compressors buzz. Glass-fronted storefronts glow like jewels advertising flavors. In 20 languages, vanilla, chocolate, mango, lavender, matcha, and something called Blue Moon that tastes like a cartoon got cold. This is no longer the domain of palaces and poets. Ice cream is now everywhere. Mau mau. You push open the door to a dim little shop. It's chilly inside, artificial cold clings to your skin. A row of freezers lines the wall, inside them tubs and tubs of smooth whipped colors. You blink. The flavors shout at you. Birthday cake, salted caramel, avocado, cereal milk. This is not subtle nor sacred. This is industrial joy. You sit down with a cone of pistachio gelato, more sugar, more fat, less ceremony. Still delicious. Mainstream history credits the 19th century with the true boom of modern ice cream, made possible by mechanical refrigeration and later home freezers. Ice no longer came from mountains or moonlight, it came from machines. Cold was no longer summoned, it was plugged in. The once patient art of cold dessert was now fast and quirky. The first commercial ice cream parlors were seen as scandalous by some. Why? Because they encouraged mixed gender mingling. Now, that's right, eating a banana split in public could lead to sin, at least according to someone's grandmother. But industrialization did more than change access. It replaced something. You walk out of the shop and follow a dusty road toward the edge of town. There, in the sun, is a crumbled yakhchāl, half-buried, ignored. Vines grow through its cracked dome. No one visits it anymore. Kids play tag on its roof, never wondering what it once held. This is extinction in slow motion, not with war, not with fire, but with forgetting. Historians still argue whether this loss matters. After all, cold treats are more accessible than ever. Anyone with a freezer and sugar can whip up a pint. Progress right, but you wonder. Because in gaining convenience, maybe something else was lost, the ritual, the chase, the connection to seasons and silence and slow satisfaction. Ice cream now is a product. It comes in a plastic tub. It's microwaved when too stiff. It's bought, consumed, and discarded like a tweet. You sit at the edge of the ruined ice pit and run your fingers along its flaking clay. Beneath the vines, you feel the ancient grooves. The architecture is still brilliant, still echoing the wind. But no one listens anymore. The badgers are silent now, too, replaced by air conditioners bolted into concrete. The sound of breath replaced by the drone of fans. You look up and see a pigeon nesting in one of the old windcatcher towers. It coos oblivious to the marvel it calls home. You close your eyes and remember what it once meant to eat cold in summer. It wasn't convenience, it was ceremony. Snow had to be hunted, captured, preserved. Syrup brewed, spoons cooled. It took days, even weeks. Now it takes BQ 4 minutes in a soft-serve machine. And don't get us wrong, we're not anti-soft serve. We're just nostalgic. You picture a servant scraping snow by moonlight hands, shaking from the cold. A noble frowning at a bowl that's 1 degree too soft. A merchant hauling saffron through sandstorms so someone's dessert can taste like sunlight. Those people. Their empires are gone, but their flavors remain. Sort of. You walk back into town. The lights are too bright. The freezers hum. The pistachio cone in your hand tastes good, but you find yourself wondering, what did this taste like when it was earned? And you can't shake the feeling that somewhere deep underground, a yakhchāl still holds a sliver of snow perfectly preserved, waiting for someone to remember how it all began. You find yourself in a city now, not a ruin, not a dusty bazaar. A full-on modern metropolis where traffic never sleeps, and every third human seems to be eating something cold on a stick. The skyline bristles with glass and steel, but it's the glowing signs that catch your eye first. Frozen yogurt, keto gelato, artisan ice cream. You squint. One place is selling avocado miso sorbet with activated charcoal. Another has blue matcha gelato infused with butterfly pea flower. Across the street, a soft-serve shop promises AI-generated flavors. You guess that means they just threw everything together and hoped the algorithm liked it. And yet, here you are, holding a small paper cup. Pistachio. Again, it's always pistachio. You take a bite. It's smooth, creamy, balanced, familiar. But what hits harder than the flavor is the ghost of something else. Something colder, simpler, more sacred. Because inside that frozen swirl are the fingerprints of 100 empires: Persian, Mughal, Roman, Arab, Sicilian, French. This isn't just ice cream. It's archaeology. You can lick. You sit down on a park bench. Neon flickers nearby. A group of teenagers giggles over a triple-decker waffle cone. A businessman in an expensive suit licks his spoon while scrolling his phone. And beside you, a kid with a grape popsicle lets the juice run down his chin like royalty who doesn't care who sees it. Ice cream has on one. Mainstream scholars acknowledge the universality of frozen desserts today. Every continent, every culture, every climate has its own version. Even places that can't sustain dairy have invented their own frozen innovations like Thai-rolled ice cream, Korean bingsu, or Filipino halo halo, all layered with ancestral sweetness. Quirky fact: in Japan there's a museum where you can try regional ice creams like octopus snake or garlic, because curiosity is apparently stronger than common sense. And yet, despite all this innovation, you begin to notice something funny. All the newest shops, the trendiest parlors in the hippest neighborhoods, they're reaching backward. They talk about ancient recipes, hand-churned, Persian-style faludi, Ottoman, salep thickener, rosewater, pistachio sorbet. You chuckle. What's old is new again, with better branding and $9 price tags. You realize the future of ice cream isn't just forward. It's circular. We've come so far from snow pits and bad years, and yet we're right back at the bowl of chilled syrup, asking ourselves if it's too sweet or just mysterious enough. Historians still argue whether this nostalgia is rooted in real culinary memory or just clever marketing. But does it matter? You're still tasting echoes, still holding a cup of something that once crossed deserts in the arms of servants who couldn't even read. You close your eyes and take another bite. And for just a second, it's not pistachio anymore. It's grape must. It's rosewater. It's crushed ice beneath a Persian moon mixed by hand and served with trembling reverence. You're not in a city. You're in a windless courtyard. A yakhchāl looms nearby. A servant holds out a bowl. A king waits watching. And then you're back. The spell breaks. The ice cream is melting. The crowd's buzzing. A dog barks at a fire hydrant. You stand and toss the empty cup. But something in you stays very still, because now you know what you've really been eating. This whole time it wasn't about dessert. It was about memory. The memory of snow in summer. The memory of hands mixing syrup and prayer. The memory of a world that once saw ice not as convenience, but as magic. And with every modern lick you've been conjuring those ghosts deliciously. You walk now without direction, down a dim alley strung with fairy lights, and the last fading scent of waffle cones. The night is warm, not unpleasant, but thick, humid. You wipe your forehead and laugh softly. All this talk of ancient cooling, and yet somehow, even in this age of technology and thermostats, you're still sticky. But there's a thought clinging to you now, one that's followed you from Persia, through India, into the gelato-slick streets of Florence and beyond. Ice cream survived. But the empires that created it, gone. You pass an old brick wall with ivy climbing up the cracks, and for a moment it reminds you of a collapsed yakhchāl dome, those thick, silent chambers where the breath of mountains once slept through July. But no one remembers the shape of those domes now. They remember the flavor. They remember the cold. That's the irony, isn't it? The thing meant to be temporary, the dessert, the bowl of snow, the summer miracle, outlived the civilizations that conjured it. It's as if the sweetness was never the real point. The moment of contrast, the cold against heat, the soft against the harsh, that was the magic. And it lingers long after the palaces are dust and the banquet halls are parking lots. Mainstream historians often refer to this as culinary persistence, when recipes, flavors, or preparation methods survive the fall of the cultures that created them. Think of it like fossilized nostalgia, or edible ruins. And in that way, ice cream is more than a treat. It's a time capsule, a gentle trick against forgetting. You duck into a corner bodega curious. The freezer hums behind the counter. You slide open the fogged glass and scan the flavors. There it is, rosewater pistachio. The modern label is covered in marketing buzzwords, vegan, small batch, ethically sourced, but you know what it really is. It's Persia trying one more time. You buy it, peel the lid, and take a bite. It's subtle, cool. The rose hits your nose before your tongue. The pistachio is smooth, not grainy like the old bowls would have been. There's too much sugar and not enough mystery, but it's still here. It exists, and that matters. You sit on a bench outside watching the night move around you. The traffic slows. Somewhere a siren wails in the distance. Two teenagers walk past laughing, one eating cookie dough ice cream from a paper cup. He offers the other a spoonful. She shrugs, tries it, grins. And you wonder, do they know they're part of something ancient? Probably not, but that's okay. Quirky detail. There's a movement among culinary historians today to reconstruct extinct desserts. Some have tried to replicate the earliest Persian sharbats using wild grapes and mountain snow, or the closest approximation in a freezer tray. Others attempt kulfi in clay molds buried in sand. A few particularly stubborn chefs have even built functioning yakhchāl replicas. And every time it's the same realization, these were not just recipes. They were, systems. Ice cream didn't rise from a single dish. It rose from architecture, from trade routes, from diplomacy, from 1,000 sweaty palms, trying to keep a bowl cold just long enough to reach a king. Historians still argue whether modern ice cream really honors its ancestors or just uses them for marketing fodder. But you sitting here under city lights know better. You close your eyes and taste the last bite, and in that coolness you feel it. The desert night, the crunch of snow, the distant drum of camel hooves, the pressure of serving the emperor his sorbet at exactly the right moment, the joy of getting it right. You smile. They're gone, but the chill remains. And sometimes that's enough. You're walking again. Slowly now, not to get anywhere, just to move, just to let the final images settle. The night is soft. The breeze carries no urgency. You turn down one last street where the lights are low and the shops are closed, but in a window glowing faintly, you see it. A single old-fashioned freezer, glass top scratched, inside just one metal tray. It's empty. You smile because somehow that's the perfect ending, because for all the sweetness and spectacle, cold things melt. That was always the deal. But what stays, what lingers in the bones? You sit on the curb, no traffic, no noise, just the hum of old cooling coils still doing their quiet job. And you think of every hand that ever scooped ice into a bowl, hesitating maybe over whether to use rose or saffron. You think of emperors too proud to admit they liked it a little too sweet. Of servants who ran miles for snow. Of domes built not for worship, but for drought preservation. And now, centuries later, here you are, still trying to taste what they tasted. Still trying to understand why a bowl of flavored snow could matter so much. Natural extinction. They call it when a species or a system or an invention quietly disappears, not with a bang, but with a shrug. Not because it failed, but because it succeeded. Too well. Ice cream outgrew its origin. And the world let the yakhchāls crumble. The irony. The ice pits worked. The wind catchers worked. That ancient knowledge, layered, patient, earthy, didn't vanish because it was wrong. It vanished because modernity said faster, colder, cheaper, louder. And in chasing perfection, we left behind the poetry of efforts. Historians still argue whether we'll ever rebuild those systems, whether they could be revived in a world of climate change, over-reliance on machines, and disposable convenience. But as you sit in this quiet place, you begin to think, maybe you don't have to rebuild a yakhchāl. Maybe you just have to remember. And in remembering, taste slower. Look longer. Let things melt without rushing to refill the bowl. You exhale. The air is warm again. Summer pressing gently against your skin. Somewhere a cat knocks over a trash can. A reminder the present isn't always elegant. You laugh. You've eaten sorbet with kings. Watched treaties sealed with ice. Crossed oceans on the back of a spoon. And through it all, cold remained the rarest luxury of all. Contrast. Now here in this quiet place, with the last empty freezer humming like an old lullaby, you feel it. The end of the bowl, the last drip, the hush, and you're ready. And now you rest. The world outside slows to a whisper. The lights dim, the road still. The freezer sighs. You feel your body soften, your thoughts loosen. That long walk through empires and flavors, desserts and kitchens, it recedes now. Gently. No rush. Let it melt. Let the old domes of mud brick fade back into sand. Let the sorbets and charbats dissolve flavor by flavor until all that remains is the coolness behind your eyes, the memory of snow in the heat, of sweetness earned, of silence that tastes like rosewater. You are not running anymore, not to serve a king, not to catch the mountain's breath before it vanishes. You are still now, and somewhere deep below, in a place the world forgot, a single sliver of ancient ice lies preserved, waiting, not for use, just for remembrance. The stars above blink slowly, like sleepy nods from long-dead emperors. Their banquets are done, their thrones are dust, but their dessert still whispers. You are wrapped now in warmth, but you carry something cool inside you, a story, chilled across millennia, resting on your tongue like a final taste. Breathe deeply. Close your eyes. Let the cold cradle you. Let the past slip sweetly into sleep.